we promised that we would have an emphasis on AI this evening and Gen AI. It's obviously the hot topic that everyone is talking about really in the past year. So we're super excited to have our panelists here tonight to tell us what they're working on and what they're seeing in the market. Tim's a fanboy. He's taking
no, it's amazing how many people showed up. It's fantastic.
So just to start, by the way, my name is Mazy. I'm OpenFin CEO. Just to start, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to very briefly introduce themselves and tell us what they do at their respective firms. Jorge, start with you.
Of course, Jorge Santos. First of all, thank you for having us here. Really exciting. I lead the Analytics and Services Product Management Division at LSEG. We work very closely with Microsoft to develop the new financial products of the future. Look after multiple aspects to develop pricing libraries for analytics models in a cross-asset form, and also very close to the AI strategy that is being developed across LSEG.
Great, thank you, Tim.
My name's Tim Baker. I run financial services at a company called Expero. We're sponsors and long-term partners with OpenFin. We build front ends and systems for expert users, and they span financial services and other industries. We built many of the widgets that you see tonight. In fact, some of the stuff you get to show OpenFin through. And we'll talk about AI downstairs as well, because we've got some really amazing AI demos as well. So I really invite people to come by and see some of the AI stuff we've been building too.
Fantastic. And Symon.
Hello. Does that work? So I'm part of Microsoft's worldwide financial services team. On my LinkedIn profile, it says that I work with business and technology leaders to unlock the strategic value of digital technologies and AI. But that sounds terrible. So I think what I actually do is I work with customers to work out what really cool stuff we can do together, and in some cases forge strategic partnerships. And as an example, I had the privilege to be part of the very large team that worked on our partnership. Is it me? Testing. Hello, Mum.
Is it running ashore?
Sorry?
Is it running on ashore?
Anyway, thank you.
I mean, now that your mic is working, we'll start with you. So the theme of this panel is all about AI for humans. So rather than AI replacing people, it's really about enabling. Can you just define hybrid intelligence for us and give us some more context for what that means?
No. I won't attempt to define it, but I'll have a go at interpreting it. So for me, it's about the fact that AI is additive to human intelligence, creativity. It's not a replacement. So at Microsoft, if you've seen any of our marketing materials, you'll know that we use the term Copilot as opposed to autopilot. And I think the two things are very closely related. And I'd just like to kind of bring it to life, I just want to read you something. It's only 2 sentences that I found on a press release from GitHub this morning. And it says, and I'm not plugging the book, but it says, when Copilot Workspace is delivered in 2024, and this is the important bit, we will be a consequential leap closer to an age where developers can use AI as a second brain. And I thought that second brain bit really resonated in terms of the augmented intelligence.
Super helpful. I love that analogy. I'm going to ask each of you, we're going to talk about customers and use cases and lots of use cases and what all that means in a second, but just want to ask each of you to talk a little bit about how you're using AI within your own products to start. Jorge, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, of course. So we're talking about AI and humans. So how do we use power and use enable productivity across our users? We do have in LSEG a large amount of cross-asset pricing libraries, for example. We've been doing that for years. We have many products around fixed income, equities, credit, you name it. We have a set of Python and TypeScript libraries. Something that, mind-blowing is that we've been working with Microsoft to utilize a set of copilots that allows users to use natural language to create pricing code. Today, a user has to download the library, go to documentation, speak to the developer as support that we have, Now you can just type what you want to do, and you can just parse very complex products in the matter of seconds. Right? And it doesn't stop there. It just understands your preferences. It understands your history. It understands what data you prefer to use, which brokers you want to use for the content. It is amazing how it just gives you the flexibility to just analyze the code, bring that human into the perspective, and start using those prices. Right? That really just reduces time in seconds. And I think that is just game-changing for all of our users.
Yeah, fascinating. I think also terrifying for the developers in the audience. Tim, how about you?
So we spend a lot of time working with expert users who by definition are kind of spanning lots and lots of data sets. Our vision, and we're starting to work with a few clients on this now, is how can you use Gen AI to unlock that vast amount of data. And it's very complex data. It's things like geospatial data. So you'll see a demo downstairs of well data. That's locations of drilling derricks. But it's also time series data, right? How is something changing through time? It could also be entity data. It could be ownership data. And it's become almost impossible for a human being to be able to, on the fly, piece together everything that's going on at that point in time. So we think that the co-pilot or the digital assistant of the future is really there to help expert users query the data, assemble the data, display and understand the data, and then ultimately to synthesize it down to something that is consumable and then communicate that out to your customer. And right now, that might take a team of bankers or a team of research analysts or a team of wealth managers and their assistants to do. And I think in the immediate future, a lot of that will be possible kind of on the fly.
Super, super interesting. Simon?
Which mic am I on? This one? So Microsoft have been infusing AI into our products for a number of years. Many of you will be familiar with kind of predictive text in Word and PowerPoint Designer, which I personally like. It works quite well. But since the interest in Gen AI has exploded over the past 12 months or so now, we've really taken a kind of a three-pronged approach. So first of all, we're, as I said, infusing AI and co-pilots into pretty much all of our first-party products. So we've got Windows Copilot, M365, Security Copilot, GitHub Copilot, and the list goes on. So very much in our first-party products. Secondly, we're making the technology stack that we use to create our copilots available to all of our customers and partners. And that's through a variety of different services that are available predominantly in Azure and some of the others. And then finally, we're working with our partner community to enable them to build their first-party products and take them to market as well.
That's great. And Simon, let's stick with you. We're definitely in the use case phase of this new technology, right? There's lots of folks have lots of different ideas about what you can do with AI and particularly with Gen AI. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of effective uses that you're starting to see of Gen AI and maybe just about how you think maybe people should be thinking about this problem?
Yeah. So the use cases comes up in every conversation around Gen AI. Everybody's, okay, what are the use cases? What are the use cases? Two quick anecdotes. One from my friends from LSEG may have heard this from Adrian Crockett, but he was working with a customer. I may have the numbers wrong, but they phoned him on a Tuesday and said, we've got 300 use cases. We need to have a workshop. It was a Thursday. And by the time he got to the workshop on the Tuesday, the number of use cases had gone up from 300 to 500 or 600 or 700. And I personally was working with a wealth management company here in London, and I went to an event that they had, and they'd got a dashboard, Power BI dashboard, where they'd collected together use cases from across the organisation, and they listed them all and were displaying them in this dashboard, and they had hundreds of them. So I think that use cases sometimes isn't a useful conversation because there are so many. But in terms of domains and the types of areas where we're really seeing Gen AI applied, if I take, for instance, a global bank based in the US, their first interest in Gen AI was around GitHub Copilot and enabling productivity for developers. And that made me think back to when cloud kind of first became a thing. And one of the key messages around cloud was, hey, you don't have to spend all that time provisioning hardware now in order to do things. You can just spin up computing on demand in the cloud. And we kind of take that for granted these days in many cases. But if you now combine that with the fact that you've also got AI to help drive developer productivity, you can spin those technology resources up in the cloud very quickly, and you can also accelerate the delivery of software and services through the developer community. Beyond that, we're seeing assistants being used to help people do knowledge management and search across internal knowledge bases. And then probably the next step beyond that is delivering services and products out to customers. So those are kind of the broad areas that we're seeing most often.
Tim, what about you? What are the effective uses that you're starting to see out there?
So again, I think it's a lot to do with navigating around complex data. There's a couple that we're working on right now. One of them is actually demoed downstairs, which is joining together. This is for an oil company M&A shop that we're working with, and they're basically looking to analyze well data so they can find out what the next M&A transaction is going to be. And to do that, you've got to look at geospatial data. You've got to be able to analyze physical infrastructure, but then you need to look at time series data and how those wells are performing. And then you need to figure out who owns those wells. And, are they listed companies, for example? And how much are they worth? And the valuation of those companies, and how much might they be willing to sell those assets for? So that's a set of data that is incredibly hard to kind of piece together. So what we've built is essentially a co-pilot or chatbot where you can ask it plain language questions and it will delve into that data. And because our framework allows composability, and we're all familiar with Minority Report, where Tom Cruise is kind of doing all of this and pulling, and the data is showing up as he needs it. That data, as you'll see from the demo, actually is available and then pulled into the application. And I think that's a great expert use case. And there's so many applications out there that have been built over the years through many, many acquisitions, and the data's all siloed. I think this is going to enable a lot of that data to be kind of rejuvenated and released into the outside world.
And are these public data sources, internal? Can you segregate between the two?
It's a mix. I think this particular client has proprietary data, but we're also using market data as well to supplement that. And obviously, you have to be careful about data leakage, but we're using GPT-4. We've got ways to now keep a lot of that data captive. But it's all about kind of semantically joining that data and then presenting it and formatting it in a very human. You'll see the demo. It's a conversation with an application that prior to GPT, would require probably days of training, and even then people would be missing content. One of the other use cases is much simpler than that. If you look at the wealth space, where we're working with, we've partnered with Morningstar actually, and we're working with a lot of wealth clients. If you think about the wealth workflow, there's just a huge amount of data that a financial advisor needs to piece together to create that best next action, the recommendation, or really understanding all the products available in the firm and delivering them systematically to the right client. That's quite a hard thing to do. But Gen AI is allowing us to kind of, again, assemble the right pieces based on the information provided to it and provide much better advice. And when I think about, screening, for example, a common use case is screening for that right mutual fund. And, we've built lovely screeners for clients, but I know that my, 87-year-old mother won't be able to, put all of the right parameters into that screener to find the right investment for herself. Actually, she can speak to a screener now and say, I'm looking for a mutual fund that's highly rated, that's doesn't invest in bad stocks, and she can craft her screen in human language, and then the co-pilot, I keep calling it a co-pilot, so it's your brand, will then drive. It's a brilliant. Our AI agent, we call it Jetpack, by the way, which we think is quite a cool name. So we think that it's going to be very democratizing for people, either expert users that struggle to find the data and stay up to date with what's going on in the market, or with novice users who are just trying to kind of use the tools in front of them.
Yeah, super helpful. Jorge, what about you?
Well, we're talking about productivity and really use hybrid intelligence. So I think there are many ways to measure productivity. It's really doing more, generating more value in a lesser amount of time. And so one of the most complex process in financial services, well, in banking, is the model life cycle. We were working with one of our customers, with the quant development team and the risk management teams, model validation. I mean, that process, you have some of the smartest people generating insights and models that sometimes it takes 3-4 months to get into production. The process is so complex. There's so much space for errors on all that process. A model that gets created, then you need to understand, you need to validate it, you need to stress test it, you need to make sure that it's compliant before you can even release it. Right? So we're working to how can you use Gen AI to understand those models, to have some sort of model explainability. Right? So use a model first. When it gets to the risk management, to the model validators, what does it do? Which parameters are really affecting the model that I have? What is this model? What is the core of it? What as a class does it really pertains to? When should I not use it? Under which conditions should I not use it? So being able to explain that, and this is very important of the hybrid aspect. This is something you would not expect to be done automatically. You bring the human in the loop, you understand the metrics the system is telling you, where the risk relies, where it is, where to change it, and then you can just really act and react to those use cases. I think one of the most fascinating use cases that I've seen, because really the way you can impact that time to production using Gen AI is really impressive.
Yeah, that's a great segue to my next question. Can you talk a little bit more about the risks of AI and what are some of the things that you're doing to mitigate those risks?
I want to take a bit of a different angle to this question. I think how to mitigate risk. I think one of the most important things that we should be responsible for is education on AI. Right? I think the majority of the firms that we're involved with in this room were investing massively or are interested on Gen AI. Right? And even with that, we're blocking the access to tools like GPT to our users. Right? I mean, I understand why, right? But how do you explain to your people how is it that you're investing in just enhanced productivity and address efficiency without bringing them into the play? Right? And if you think about that nowadays people compare Gen AI with the wave of internet. It's almost as impactful of what happened with the internet, right? We do have around 65% of the people that have access to internet, whereas it's only 2% that have access to a Gen AI. For example, just as a focus, ChatGPT had 180 users, right? 2% of the population. What happens when you get 10% or 20%, right? The amount of use cases of bad AI use cases that are going to be there are going to be just great, right? So how do you battle bad AI with just good AI, right? So you have to educate your people on how to be more productive, more efficient, and that education is going to allow them to be really mitigate that risk, right? On a different way. Right?
Yep. Great, Tim.
So I think there's a few areas here. I mean, outside of the classic kind of bias issue, if you've trained on certain data, if you're granting mortgages, for example, based on geography, then you might have a racial bias in your data set. So we know about a lot of that. And hallucinations, obviously, you can ask these models the same question and you'll get a slightly different output, and it may well be the wrong answer. I know that Microsoft's kind of addressing that in many ways. On our side, the way we look at that is we're using Gen AI to assemble factual data that we're still putting in front of a human being. And it's either an expert user, a banker who goes, of course, right, that data's right, that's data, and it's usually based on factual data, so a mosaic of correct data. Or it's client data that, again, is coming from those internal repositories. So I think making sure that you dial back to facts that are driven by what's in the firm, and you're really just using the LLM to drive the input process, how you get to that data, how we think about it.
Great. Symon.
I really like Jorge's points, actually, about educating people. I mean, if you think about the way we teach everybody and young people today about online safety, teaching them about AI safety and risks also seems like a good idea. At Microsoft, we've we refer to responsible AI is the term that we use, and we've been on the journey for a good few years, going back to about 2016, I think, when our current CEO wrote a particular paper. Our journey was, we started with a set of principles which addressed the main risk areas, which from memory were fairness, reliability and security, transparency. There you go, I've forgotten the other three. But addresses the main risk areas with a set of principles. Then we moved from principles to governance and set up, first of all, we set up what we call our AETHA committee, which is AI ethics in engineering and research. Then we also set up a central body called the Office of Responsible AI. We set up a network of champions and a series of processes whereby if our engineering teams or our field sales teams were working with a customer who proposed a particular solution or way of using AI that violated or was in conflict with any of the principles that we'd established, then there was a whole process for that being assessed. One example is the use of facial recognition with security services, for instance. That was the classic example. Then more recently, we've moved into policies and strategy, engaging with legislators and regulators and lobbying for a responsible AI framework to be adopted. And then we've also started to build tools and capabilities into our product set to enable people to actually implement responsible AI in practice. So, for example, just reading some of my emails today, I see that we've got some of our content filters are now part of our Azure AI Studio, for example. So we're building those sorts of practical features into the product set to enable our customers and partners to actually practice what we call responsible AI.
Terrific. So we're actually out of time, but I'd like to ask you to each make a prediction of when it comes to hybrid intelligence, a business process that you expect to change dramatically in the next, say, 2 to 3 years. Simon, start with you.
I can't even tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone in 2 to 3 years. I would just say that I personally expect pretty much every business process to be affected or impacted by AI and generative AI specifically within the next 2 to 3 years. I'd be surprised at the ones that aren't, particularly relating obviously to knowledge work.
Yeah, I think any new software that's being built and delivered in 2 years will have AI built into it. My background is equity research, and as an analyst, I could only just about cover 10 or 12 stocks, and in my case, it wasn't that well. I think if I had these tools available to me now, I could probably cover 3 or 4 times the number of stocks. So I think in the asset management world, you're going to see a big productivity boost, but actually more than that, a lot of uncovered stocks are going to get some coverage, which I think is a great thing for investors. So I would expect equity research and banking and a lot of those types of workflows are going to be dramatically changed in 2 or 3 years' time.
To Simon's point that we don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow, I received the questions just a few minutes before we started, and the question says on the next 23 years, and I panicked. But okay, so I'm glad that it's 2 to 3 years, right? So I think like specific to financial services, I think like compliance and regulation will have a big change on how people understand, adhere, and be compliant to regulation. But also one of the things that I really find fascinating is what may happen in financial engineering. So we're talking about really how does finance really leverage Gen AI to understand risk, to understand pricing. Like if you detect any risk, how do I hedge it on the fly? How do I create a product that is going to allow me to mitigate that risk? Right? How can I just actually price it and understand value in different ways? So how AI is evolving to really understand, I mean, we know that it's a probabilistic model, but to understand really that thought process that is going to allow you to understand mathematics and financial engineering from the language perspective, I think that is going to be a huge impact on the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. Fantastic. Please join me in thanking our panelists.